Good afternoon, Frank.
Good afternoon, Professor Spooner.
So it's some time since we talked because of the events of the last couple of weeks, which have taken a lot of people by surprise.
I should say.
Some natural and some social and some other dimensions of globalization. I understand that you've been without power for a significant period over the last week.
Yes, in our home in New Jersey, we were without power for 11 days. And there's still approximately, I understand, 700,000 people without power. So,
700,000 in New Jersey.
That's correct. So we're lucky, I suppose.
And there's still speculation about whether this was a major factor in the election results on Tuesday.
Yes, President Obama came up to New Jersey. He spent the afternoon here, I think a week ago today, actually,
and
yesterday.
Got a great deal of help from the Republican governor of New Jersey.
He did.
But it's the distribution of these events has been very unexpected as well. For example, for Sandy, Philadelphia was in the center of the path as it was published on the web. And we couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. It rained and there was a little wind, but there was nothing that justified closing everything down for 2 days.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think what it points to, in my mind, two things. First of all, from a climate perspective, the New Jersey shore now, in a span of 10 days, was hit by a tropical storm, a very strong tropical storm. 10 days later, it was hit by a snowstorm, a major snowstorm. Now, tropical storm, snowstorm, 10 days. That's not supposed to happen. That's very unusual. Climate change, question mark, possibly. The second thing it points to in my mind is the fragility of the infrastructure. All right, this is the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut metropolitan area. It's arguably the most densely populated part of the country. One would think the infrastructure is perhaps the most built up. And yet, south of, I believe, 34th Street in Manhattan, Mayor Bloomberg cut the power off. He had no choice because he was faced with shorting out transformers up and down the east and west side as well as in the Battery. And evacuations had to take place. So I must say that I couldn't help but think during the days we were without power about a study that I had read on your recommendation put together by Chatham House in London about the food distribution network in the United Kingdom, in which the premise of the study was that if there was a hauler strike or a Teamster strike, within 36 hours, food would begin to disappear from grocery store, supermarket shelves. That would then lead to civil disorder. And I saw traces of civil disorder. There was a curfew enforced by the police in our little town from 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. every morning. You could not go out on the street because they were concerned about vandalism and looting. So, it woke me up. It woke me up.
Now, I see this as a beautiful textbook example of which illustrates the problem of globalization, which is that change is advancing further and faster than we can keep up with in terms of our institutional forms and our infrastructure. And I think this is going to continue at least for the rest of this decade. And then the rate of change may start to slow down a little bit. But we haven't got used to the fact yet that the bridges we built in the 1950s need to be redone.
Yes.
Either rebuilt or seriously repaired. We still complain about global warming as though it's somebody's fault, whereas in fact we should be expecting climate change because the climate's been changing ever since human beings started their activities rose to a level which obviously had an effect on the environment. So we should be planning for the change, not trying to prevent the change.
Well, one thing I find very interesting is that we often talk about the inadequacy of our institutions, our social institutions, our governmental institutions, to deal with the rates of change that's going on. And that's a very appropriate discussion. But let's face it, it sort of pales in comparison to like real climate change. All right, it's a little theoretical when you compare it to a 16 or 17 foot rise in the sea level that comes on a high tide, on a full moon night, with a northeaster pushing it up, very strong winds, and causes the kind of devastation that it caused. That then leads to the power interruptions that at one point had 5.5 million people in the dark, 5.5 million customers, not people, customers, times what, 3 people in each family, so to speak, right? Then you're in a position where you're right. I mean, the institutions can't keep up with the change. They can't keep up with them at all. The local governments can't keep up with it. The state government can't keep up with it. The utility companies can't keep up with it. I mean, basic order, and this is really what got my attention, is that the basic order that you rely on was, I wouldn't say breaking down, but I could see the seams very easily every day.
But also the news reported a great deal at the time of the first storm of Sandy about people coming together and helping each other in the face of unexpected difficulties.
There was a lot of that. There was a lot of that in our town. But I guess what I'm wondering is, driving into work today, I overheard on NPR an interview with a woman on the Jersey Shore who had been without power now for the 13 days now, who had been struck by the new storm, all right, that had seen some storm surge and had apparently caused disruption to the repairs that the power company had done to get her power back on, which hadn't occurred yet, but it was now pushed back even another 2 weeks. And this woman she'd given up. She had said, I can't do this anymore. I can't go through this. Now we have 6 inches of snow in front of the house. I mean, I just can't do it anymore. And it just struck me that we talk about globalization, we talk about rates of change, but it's almost like Mother Nature said, yeah, you want to see rates of change? You want to see rates of change here? I'll tell you something that's rates of change, and it's not theoretical. I mean, you're going to feel it.
But the further advanced our society becomes, the more divorced we become from actual direct interaction with natural processes. And so when something unexpected in the day-to-day natural processes actually occurs, it's likely to cause this sort of problem. It's another example of the volatility that I think comes with it comes with this stage of globalization, and it comes with this stage of globalization because all types of infrastructure are failing to keep up with the problems that have to be dealt with. And so much now that used to be taken care of in a matter of course because everybody knew what to do, can't be taken care of that way anymore. And people are not sure what their duties, obligations, rights are in relation to other people when the system breaks down.
Well, I think you're correct. And as you know, one of the things that I do is we have a little internet television show every day that sort of categorizes and covers catastrophes worldwide. And I can't count the times I've reported on earthquakes in Guatemala or Indonesia, typhoons that strike the Philippines, typhoons that strike India, that strike Malaysia. And all of these things, and I'll be candid, I'm in a little cocoon of affluent northeastern U.S. kind of above it all, but I'm never going to be able to look at one of these events again without realizing really what's at stake here. I mean, people have to go through an awful lot.
Well, we didn't get very detailed reporting here about the problems in Europe last winter, I don't think.
With Lothar. Mm-hmm. The storm Lothar, that was a huge event for the reinsurance industry.
And now we've got this this is after all the first half of November, when it's not normally wouldn't snow and we have quite pleasant weather. I mean, I've got an array of chrysanthemums outside my house, which don't usually associate with 6 inches of snow. Well, maybe that's the reason the snow didn't fall in West Philadelphia. I don't know.
Maybe so. Yep, yep.
But the incidence of this type of event is becoming less and less predictable.
Well, you could say that, or you could look at it the other way. You could say that the frequency and severity of these kinds of events is becoming more frequent, if you will.
But I think the reason we had a tropical storm and then a winter storm is so close to each other was that one came up from the south and one came down from the northeast, right?
I believe so. But again, that you go all back to the global warming. I mean, how much of this is attributable to the increase in the depth of the sea and the sea level? How much of it is due to the increase in the temperatures? How much of it is due to the melting of the ice caps? And the science, as you know, in my opinion, as well as in your opinion, is irrefutable that there is climate change going on. But insofar as what the climate change has done, insofar as creating these effects, that's something that's still open for debate as to if this can ever be traced back as a result of being a cause of global warming. I don't know.
I don't contest the idea of global warming, but I would simply say that there's always been climate change. It's not that long ago that in the winter you could roast an ox on the ice in the Thames in London, and you haven't been able to do that for a couple of 100 years.
You're right, and I can remember my grandfather telling me that when he grew up in New York City in the early 1900s, he once walked across the frozen Hudson River to New Jersey. Oh. That hasn't happened in my lifetime.
Yeah. So climate has always been changing. It's just that maybe it's changing faster now than it was before. But I think that we're much more aware of the situation as we know it, and much more concerned about things that fall outside our experience than we used to be before. And of course, the news is known everywhere. And so it becomes much more of a public event than it did before.
Well, that's an interesting observation. Let me tell you a quick anecdote. We were scheduled to go to London this Saturday night. We had an event scheduled over there, I believe, on November 13th, on Tuesday night. And but we had to postpone the event. We're going over in January because I couldn't ask people to go who did not have electricity yet or who still had some significant home issues going on. So we sent an email out to the 40 or so people who had RSVP'd yes already. Everybody responded back, indicating complete knowledge and awareness of what had happened in New Jersey and sympathizing with our decision and saying that it was the right decision to make. I was rather surprised that it had received this sort of international press attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe globalization is already there.
Maybe so. Do you have any observations about the presidential election?
It's interesting, particularly that the results are reckoned to be not due to the enormous contributions of major donors, but more than anything else, and not due to Bill Clinton or Mitt Romney's wife or other figures that played a part, but more than anything else due to the changing demography of this country.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, it could lead in more than one direction, because part of the changing demography is the increase in the proportion of the population above 60, and those, if they increase too much, then the Republicans will win the next election.
Well, I'm not that worried about that. There's only an 8-point spread I saw above 60 years of age favoring the Republicans. But meanwhile, mostly anybody who's young and anybody who's an immigrant or anybody who's maybe first-generation descendant seems to be leaning toward the Democrats.
Yeah.
I was fascinated by the election, and I was most fascinated by the response of older Caucasian men on television, outraged that they seemed now to be in the minority.
Yes.
So what's the problem? I mean, you're still an American. The government has to reflect the composition of the populace, and that's the whole principle of democracy. Is it fear?
There's too many of them have immigrated to America from the countries that were outside the Enlightenment process in the 17th and 18th centuries.
Well,
And Enlightenment has not yet percolated far enough beyond Northwestern Europe and North America.
Well, that's unfortunate. So
good. Okay. Well,
all right, Professor.
There's no more evidence of these types of volatility before next week.
Barring any natural catastrophes, we'll be on the same time, same station next Thursday, sir. Thank you.
Bye.